Hello everyone, welcome back to Purple Rose Crafts. Today we're going to talk about how to do a new stitch with our Tunisian hook. We are going to talk about how to do the Tunisian Purl Stitch, which is going to move along with our Tunisian Simple Stitch to create these two fun patterns. The first is going to be our ribbing, which is basically going to create these great vertical bars. So we're going to create this kind of fun sort of ribbing pattern here with the darker color, and then with our lighter color we're going to do our honeycomb stitch. Now these are both actually very similar patterns, although they do look completely different. And I will also include a pattern for a dishcloth with both of these stitch styles in the blog post, which will be linked below. For our materials, we're going to use our 4.5mm Tunisian hook, and we are going to use some all cotton yarn. It is our lion brown called Kaboo, and we have this nice ice blue color for our honeycomb, and a darker color is called denim, and it is this kind of like blue color. And these ones are both 3s, which actually makes a little bit more sense using our 4.5mm Tunisian hook. This one actually recommends a 4mm crochet hook, so we like to size up our crochet hook when we do Tunisian. If you're new to Tunisian crochet, please watch the Tunisian Simple Stitch video that we did previously, and then we're going to introduce a Tunisian Purl Stitch, and that is what we're going to use to make our super fun ribbing and our honeycomb pattern. All right, let's jump in. So to get started with our Tunisian Purl Stitch, we are going to chain a little swatch. So we're going to chain about 10 stitches, and then we're going to do our first row of Tunisian Simple Stitch. So we're going to insert our hook through the back loop of our chain and draw up our loop. Now we're going to do Tunisian Simple Stitch all the way across. All right, so this is our reverse pass. It is a normal, simple Tunisian reverse pass, and there is our nice Tunisian stitch. To do our first stitch, we are going to insert our hook for a normal Tunisian stitch. Now for the Tunisian Purl Stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to bring our yarn down to the front. Okay, so bring it down out of the way, then we're going to insert like a Tunisian Simple Stitch, bring our yarn over and around our hook and catch the hook at the top here. So this one's going to come across the front. And then we're going to loop our yarn up, give it a little bit of a tug, just gentle tug. You don't want it to be too tight there. We're going to do another Tunisian Simple Stitch here next to it, okay? So you can see the difference of what's happening, okay? We've got our vertical bar here. This is our Tunisian Simple Stitch. And then our Purl Stitch gives us this kind of horizontal bar that comes across. You can see the one, and so it's kind of 2 horizontal bars. You can see the one here, which is our yarn as we wrapped it around, and then we've got our actual stitch here at the top. So we've got kind of 2 horizontal bars for our Tunisian Purl Stitch, okay? And then here again we have our Simple Stitch. So we are going to bring our yarn down to the front, insert it through the vertical bar like that, and then wrap our yarn around our hook and through and loop it, and then we're going to give a gentle little tug there as well, okay? So now yarn to the back and over our hook. Now Tunisian Purl Stitch again. So we're going to bring our yarn down to the front, insert it into the vertical bar, bring our yarn across the front and then around the back of the hook. Make sure you're looping it around the back of the hook to make sure that it is going to turn out the right way. One last one here, and then we're going to finish the end of the row with a Tunisian Simple Stitch again, okay? Now this one is going to go through both strands at the end of the row. All right, and then we're gonna yarn over and draw up our loop. So now we have all stitches on our needle, on our hook, I mean our long Tunisian hook, and we're gonna do our return pass, which if you've done any of the previous Tunisian videos, you know that the return pass will always be the same. So what we have happening here is we have our holes, which are normal of Tunisian. You're gonna finish off your work the same way that we did the initial dishcloth video that we talked about. You're gonna follow the stitches and do the extra loop and, you know, finish off with the chain. You're gonna do the stitch and finish it at the same time when you get to the end of your work. And I'll show that at the end here with our honeycomb stitch swatch as well, okay? So for this one, we can see the difference in our stitches first of all. Tunisian Simple Stitch is this vertical bar, which is typical of Tunisian, right? You normally see that vertical bar here. That's our Tunisian simple stitch. The Tunisian Purl Stitch is this one here with the horizontal bars at the bottom, okay? We still have our vertical one, it's above, okay? But it's a lot smaller than the simple stitch, okay? Which you can see here, okay? This one's a little bit smaller, and we have these horizontal bars at the bottom. So that is our purl stitch. Now, we're gonna talk about two different patterns you can do with purl stitch and our simple Tunisian stitches. And to do that, we're going to make our modification for ribbing. So this one, we are going to follow our stitches the same way that we have done for the previous row. You're going to do simple stitches on the simple stitches, drop a loop like so, and this one is a purl, so we're gonna do another purl. Okay, and then a simple stitch next to it. And then this is our purl stitch again, because we're alternating back and forth. Now, this one is going to create this vertical ribbing that you're seeing here, and it's gonna give us kind of like a flat stitch in the middle for the purl stitch. So that's gonna create our ribbing. I do find the purl stitch a little bit fiddly, but I do really like the way that it looks, and it doesn't seem that much slower. Like when we talked about the knit stitch, I just found that one to be so slow. But anyways, it does look really pretty. All right, so there we go. We're finishing off our row, and now we're gonna do our return pass. So chain the first stitch, and then draw through two, draw through two, draw through two, all the way back to the beginning of the row. Okay, and we're gonna do a couple more rows of this, and then I'll show you what our final product is. We're gonna do a couple more rows of that, and then we're gonna show our finishing row. So to get started with our honeycomb stitch, what we are starting with right now is an uneven number of stitches, but it doesn't matter how many stitches you start with for the honeycomb stitch. What you're gonna do, because we're working forwards on each row, you're just gonna alternate your stitches back and forth. For this one, we are going to start with the way that we have taught every single Tunisian section so far. We start with a Tunisian simple first row. Now we are going to insert our hook through the vertical bar to make a Tunisian simple stitch. The next one is going to be a Tunisian purl stitch. So we're gonna bring our yarn to the front, Tunisian simple. Okay, we're gonna alternate these stitches back and forth the way that we did for our Tunisian ribbing, but the difference will be on the second row. So we're gonna go ahead and work this row, finish there with a simple stitch, and we're gonna do our last stitch as a simple stitch. It will be the same on every row, and it will always be the Tunisian simple for this last one through the two hands at the end of our row. So there you can see two pieces of yarn crossing over, and we're gonna draw up our loop in there. All right, so keep this first chain relatively loose, and we're gonna work our way back with our normal return pass. And now in the ribbing pattern, we do our stitches the same, one on top of another, but for our honeycomb stitch, we're going to alternate. So what we've started with is our simple stitch, and then we have our purl. So now we're gonna do a purl first, and then we're gonna come over, and this one is a purl stitch, and we are going to do a simple over top, okay? And so you're gonna alternate back and forth for this honeycomb pattern. So that's our Tunisian honeycomb. So you can see what's happening. Hopefully you can see what's happening here. We're starting to create this kind of like rounded honeycomb pattern in our stitches. Okay, then we're gonna lift our last stitch here, and then we're gonna do our return pass. And then we're going to keep alternating our rows back and forth for our forward passes. And that will give us our honeycomb stitch. And so this one, again, looks like our Tunisian row with all of our holes. But I will show you how to finish that off here in just a moment. So go ahead and keep working on that. Keep alternating back and forth to make your honeycomb stitch. All right, and then we will finish off with our finishing row using our, basically similar to our finishing row that we did for the Tunisian simple stitch. We're just gonna alternate our stitches back and forth, but I'll show you that right now. Now that you've seen how that looks and everything looks really good, I'm gonna bring up our other swatch here, which this is our honeycomb stitch. And this yarn is just so soft. And for this one, we're gonna do our final row. We're gonna insert our hook again, and we have our Tunisian simple stitch here as the first stitch. And so we are going to do our Tunisian purl on top of it. As we've been doing in our honeycomb stitch, you are going to alternate your stitches. So I'm pulling my yarn down to the bottom so we can do a Tunisian purl stitch as our first stitch on this row. And as we did in the initial Tunisian video, we're gonna finish it off by chaining the 2 stitches together. So this is a purl stitch. So now we wanna put a simple stitch over top of it because we want to stay in pattern. And then we're gonna finish it. But if you're doing the ribbing, our rows match up. So you're gonna do simples over simples and purls over purls, and then chain 2 stitches together. Keep just 1 loop on your hook for the final row. And that's gonna give us our pretty finished edge. And it's gonna push everything down, cover up our holes, and it's going to finish everything off really, really nice. All right, and then here at the end of the row, we're just going to do our regular Tunisian simple stitch, the way that we do finish off every single row. Okay, so then we bring our loop up, chain the 2 together, all right, and then we can fasten it off. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut our yarn and pull our strand out, leave ourselves a little tail, and then we can weave those in. All right, if you made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button below, subscribe to our channel, and then click this video on the screen here because it is one that you will definitely want to watch next. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. See you next time.